Hi and welcome to the video. I assume you're here because you're interested in a new fan, and if that's the case, then you've come to the right place. We've currently tested 6 of the most common devices here and, of course, compared all of them with each other. And if you want to know which device performed the best, then just stay tuned. We are now going to take a closer look at the products. As far as the price range is concerned, most segments are covered, from the affordable Philips to the expensive Dyson and, of course, quite a bit in between. The products in the middle are particularly interesting, specifically the ones I have placed on a pedestal. These are so-called misting fans, which are devices that can also mist water. That is why they have integrated tanks at the bottom. The water is misted using ultrasound, which is supposed to provide an additional cooling effect. So, if you are interested in one of the products, check the description below the video. There, we have linked all devices for you. Otherwise, let's get to the essentials, namely our practical test. And for that, I've come up with something special. I did some research on the top places to use these fans and found the top 3. And we're starting now with the third place, which is, well, where people watch football, namely in the living room. Similarly, this also applies to the home office, or, more generally, the office. These are definitely very similar areas of use. Here you conduct video calls or watch television and sit together with the family. The device must perform well here, but it must also not be distracting. 2 things are important here, and that is, first of all, the device is not right in front of your nose. That would be nonsense. In an application like the living room or the office, the device sits in some corner and ultimately has to cover a few meters to reach you. So, it must be powerful enough. On the other hand, it shouldn't be too loud either because I still need to hear my TV or my video call or whatever else is going on. To test this properly, we first set up a test environment. So, first we cleared away all products except for one, and then we made ourselves comfortable as if we were about to watch a football match. The distance between the device and the sofa was about 2.5 meters, and then we started measuring. To be comfortable on the sofa, we need a wind speed of about 0.75 to 1.0 meters per second. All devices can actually manage that. And they do so on, let's say, well, depending on the device, on a low to medium setting. After we had set the devices to the appropriate level, we then measured the volume. The Shark performed particularly well here. It had, let's say, 28 to 29 decibels, and the Drio 765S was also quite good at, let's say, 29 to just over 30 decibels. The others weren't too bad either. Only the Dyson really stood out. It had about 43 to, let's say, 47 decibels, and is therefore the worst in this test. What I also noticed while testing on the sofa is that comfort definitely plays a role too. You don't want to keep getting up to go to the device. So, in that respect, it is quite good if a remote control is included. And indeed, all devices have such a thing except for one, which is the Philips. Instead, Philips is relying on an app, and I think that is a bad trade. They should rather skip the app and give me a remote control instead of the other way around. In the end, it just leads to you walking over to the device and adjusting it manually, because you simply do not always feel like digging your phone out of your pocket or whatever, and then having to start the app and find your way around it. In principle, I think it's quite good if an app is included. Most devices have that. Especially the Drio devices have a very good app integrated. Interestingly, the slightly more expensive devices do not have that. These are the Shark and the Dyson. Of all things, those devices do not have an app on board. And I have to be honest, even though I like a remote controls better, it's a bit of a shame that an app is missing here. Given the price, I think that should actually be included. Yes, and then another important point. When it comes to operating these devices in the living room or the office or something, in my opinion, it is the oscillation. You don't always want the fan blowing directly at you. Sometimes you want the breeze to spread out a little and, ideally, cover the entire room. And that means that, in my view, a fan like this should be able to oscillate at least 90 degrees. I'm showing this here as an example with the Dyson. It is able to do the 90 degrees oscillation, and all the others can do that too. That means every device in this test is able to do at least 90 degrees. so you can't really go wrong. But there are some that stand out a bit, especially the Shark, which can do up to 180 degrees. That is of course quite nice if you have a room where you do not want to put the device in a corner, but rather against a wall. That would naturally mean that you don't just ventilate half a room. Instead, you can cover effectively everything. That is, of course, pretty cool. None of the other devices can keep up with that. The Drio devices can also do quite a lot. The Drio Turbo Poly, for example, can reach up to 150 degrees. That is already quite good, but the Shark is definitely the best one there. Only when it comes to the interval settings, the Turbo Poly is actually a bit better. Here it is a little easier to adjust precisely. If we count up the points for our test area living room/office, we come to the conclusion that the Drio Turbo Poly is in third place. The Drio 765S is in second place, and the Shark is in first place. The Dyson is quite far behind. It just didn't perform as well here in terms of wind speed and noise level, which, considering the price range, is actually not such a good result, to be honest. And just a reminder, if you are interested in any of the products, check the description below the video. We have linked them all for you there, and you will certainly find a few individual tests as well. So, take a look at that. Alright, let's head to the next location. But before we can start with that, we first have to do a quick test to clarify something regarding the misting fans. To do this test, I have set up a thermohygrometer here. It is already showing about 21 to 22 degrees, and there is also a relatively high humidity in this room. And here is the Drio 516S, one of the misting fans. But before we start misting, I first want to just run the fan and show you something with it. Let's go.
A few moments later.
So, a few minutes have passed and you can see that the wind is reaching the thermohygrometer. Even now, it's still 21.6. Before it was about 21.7 or somewhere around there. You can see it does not really do much. And that is because a regular fan just moves the air. And that creates a wind chill effect on the skin. That is what it is called. So it cools the skin, but the room temperature is not really lowered. And that is what this misting function is for. This should change things a little bit now. Let's try that out.
A few moments later.
We obviously have to give it a few minutes again. Yes, okay, that should be enough. You can definitely see that we have come down here, quite clearly in temperature from 21.6, 21.7 within a few minutes to 21.1. And if I were to let it run like this for longer, we would probably come down a bit more. This is only level 1 of the device, so it has a bit more power if you want it. The main disadvantage, however, is that the humidity is slowly but surely rising. And you really do not want that indoors or in your living space, at least not usually. Unless you have a room where it makes sense, but normally it doesn't. So that means these devices are primarily suitable for outdoors. And that is also the interesting thing, because in my research I found out that the location terrace or balcony is in second place. So, many people nowadays like to take a fan outside, but, of course, only on the condition that it can actually cool them down there. And that is quite difficult with classic ventilation outdoors. That is why we now have misting here, which can provide real cooling outside. With that in mind, we now come to our outdoor test setting. We have now seen that the misting creates a cooling effect. Next, we want to determine how the devices perform in a direct comparison, meaning which mister mists the best, especially under outdoor conditions, for example with a light breeze or similar. Here, it became clear that the cooling effect depends heavily on the type of misting. The effect is simply greater, or let's say more intense, when as much mist as possible reaches you, and it's greatest when, well, you'll see in a moment. Let's start with the small Drio. It projects its mist forward in a sort of beam. Indoors, that's sufficient, even if you're standing right next to it. Outdoors, this effect dissipates a little. You should also set it to a slightly higher level so the wind doesn't just blow the mist away. The device passed the moisture test well. I don't think you can see it very well, but on the tablet at a distance of 20 to 30 centimeters, there was no visible moisture after direct misting. So you really don't have to worry about that with this device. On the other hand, it lacks a bit of power. The portability is also good. It is a small, light device with a handle, so it is easy to move, but it needs power. So, if in doubt, you have to work with cables outside too. The large Drio 765S is, one simply has to say, in a different league than its little brother. Here too, you should work with a higher setting outdoors. Otherwise, the mist could be dispersed by the wind. But the device has many levels and plenty of power available, plus a total of 4 misting nozzles. At full misting capacity, you get a quite wide and expansive mist and consequently, a fairly decent cooling effect. However, there is a flip side to the coin. Precisely because the device has so much power, at a high setting, clear moisture deposits can be seen on the table and also on the tablet. So if you get too close, that can be annoying. Therefore, plan for some distance or choose lower settings, then it should be fine. Unfortunately, mobility is somewhat limited with the large Drio. It is a big, heavy, and bulky device. It does have a carrying handle, but it is not that easy to move around. It also needs power, so you have to work with cables again. With the SharkFlex Breeze, you first notice that the water tank is a bit more complex. The hose has to be unscrewed and screwed back on. That is a bit more work than with the Drio devices. Regarding the misting, you quickly notice that we do not have a fine mist here, but rather a kind of spray. This spray also makes you relatively wet quite quickly. I will spare my tablet that for now, but I think you can see it quite well when I hold my hand in front of it. It starts dripping quickly, and the table is also wet within seconds. You should stay as far away as possible, turn the settings down, and definitely do not use it indoors. So, unfortunately, it is not quite as pleasant as with the Drio devices. Still, when summer really kicks in, I can imagine using it, simply because it cools things down quite well. You do get damp quickly, and that, combined with the wind chill effect from the fan, provides the strongest cooling effect of all the fans. However, you have to be careful not to overdo it and catch a cold. The Shark is also a relatively large device, and while it has a carrying handle, it is still a bit bulky. Nevertheless, its mobility is optimal, as you can convert the whole thing into a desk fan. It also has a battery, so you do not need to run cables when you are outside. By the way, the Turbo Poly from Drio is just as mobile. You can also convert it into a desk fan, although, as far as I know, it does not have a battery. Let us move on to the test winner for terraces and balconies. In last place, we have the Shark. The spray mist is quite nice, but I think it is usually a bit over the top. In second place, we have the Drio 516S, and in first place, the Drio 765S. We have left the other fans out of this evaluation, but of course they can also be used for a fresh breeze on the terrace, just for the classic wind chill effect. Okay, let's move on to our final location, which is our #1 spot, and that is the bedroom. You could probably already guess that, as most users naturally want to be able to sleep well. That is what matters most to people. And if you have one of those intense tropical nights or something, and it's really stifling, then a fan like this can certainly provide some relief. Of course, the device must also be suitable for this location. So that means when it comes to sleeping, raw power and the big blast is ultimately not what you want. It is about providing cooling as gently as possible while being as whisper quiet as possible. We already tested that in our living room section. We already know which devices are good, but at night, a few other things play a role too. It's also about how much power it consumes, since the device runs for quite a long time. And it's also about the timer and how it can be set, or whether the device can also dim its display. We want to look at all these questions now as part of our bedroom test, and for that, we are setting up a bedroom scene. We are repurposing the living room for this. That means, first of all, everything out that we put in here before. Then the sofa is turned into a bed and a small nightstand with a few nice things on it. And here too, we place our device at a distance that is realistic for this test. So let's say 2.5 meters. Here too, you naturally don't want the device right in front of your face. Alright guys, the camp is set up. The first device is already running here, and I have to go get some test sleep now. Let's go.
3 hours later.
So, I'm awake again, and now we come to what I found out during my test night. First key finding. The devices that were the quietest in the living room test were, of course, the quietest here as well. So, there's no getting around that. Those are naturally best suited for sleeping or for the bedroom in general. Beyond that, there are also a few smaller points that could be quite interesting as well, and especially when it's dark, you can actually see quite well whether that's distracting or not. And the first point here is the display. Basically, the display on all devices turns off after some time. But there are, well, let's say 1 or 2 things that I noticed there. The first thing was with the Shark device. It is true that the LED lighting, or whatever that is, turns off after a while, but I somehow couldn't get the charging indicator to turn off. So, something kept blinking there the whole time. And honestly, even with research, I couldn't figure out how to prevent that. The next point is the Dyson. Here, I also just could not get the normal display to turn off. It did not go off over time and, well, after I did a bit of research, I found out it should actually turn off, but I somehow could not manage it. And then, we have the Philips. Here, the lighting also turns off after some time. But there is also a sleep mode, which actually results in not only the lights turning off faster, but the button sounds being turned off as well. So if you come in at night and your partner is sleeping and you want to go to bed, it doesn't beep around and you don't wake your partner up. The next point is the timer options. Personally, I believe that for the night at least 8 hours of timer should be available, so that I can say, perhaps, after half the night the device should switch off. Or after 6 hours or whatever. And basically, all devices offer that too. The Drio devices in particular really shine here, if you will, with a 12-hour timer adjustable in 1-hour increments. The same applies to the Dyson, which also performed quite well here. The one that stood out a bit negatively in terms of the timer, funnily enough, is the Shark. It only has up to 5 hours that you can set here, in 1-hour increments at least. But 5 hours is, in my opinion, a bit too little for the night. As for power consumption, which is especially important here because the device is meant to run for hours, the Drio devices really stood out. They were the absolute leaders, especially the Turbo Poly with only 3.1 watts. That is really quite impressive. You do not need to worry about these devices if you want to leave them running at night. Interestingly, the Dyson and especially the Philips device performed quite poorly here. So let's evaluate the points for the bedroom. That brings us to the Shark in third place, the Drio Turbo Poly in second, and the Drio 765S in first place. Once again, the Dyson is far behind. Okay, that is it. I will write down the results for each location for you here, and I would also like to name an overall winner. But you should, of course, look at which area of use interests you most, or makes the most sense for you. And then you should naturally go by that instead. With that said, if you are interested in one of the products, then take a look at the description below the video. We have linked them all there for you, and you can also find individual tests there. And if, despite everything, you are still not sure which device is the right one for you, then click right here.